Hi, guys. I'm glad they extended the contest because who knows, maybe I'll be your favorite part of the day, right? So do you guys still have energy? Are you like tired? You ate lunch and you're like over it? Are you over it?
No.
Are you excited to talk about sales?
Yes.
Are you going to be like, oh, now I'm walking out? Yeah, no. All right, hopefully you're on board. So we are all wedding professionals, right? So you're like, I plan weddings. I do floral. I do stationery. I'm not a salesperson. Well, ultimately, we're all salespeople. Every single one of us in this room. Because when we're working with our clients, we're selling them on our creative services. We're selling them on our talents, and we're selling them ultimately on ourselves, right? So we are all salespeople. In order for us to be truly successful at what we do, and PS, to make money, we need to learn to master the art of selling. It's not easy, it takes practice, but it can be done. So let's talk about how to sell. Shall we? Okay. How many of you think of this guy when you think of selling, right? You don't want to be this guy. So hopefully, when we're done with this talk, you'll feel a little bit more like this. So as I look around this room, there's a lot of women in here. And I don't mean to offend anyone, but I think as women, we have a little bit more of a difficult time selling than men do. Do you guys agree with me? I think we were raised to not be pushy. We were raised to not be bossy. Nobody likes somebody who's bossy. And we were raised to want people to like us. So sometimes I think selling feels a little bit unnatural for us. We also have learned from the Knot studies that millennials and Gen Zs don't like to be sold to. The second you start selling to them, they shut down. So what do? How do you sell to somebody who doesn't want to be sold to? And how do you sell when you're not comfortable with selling? So I think what it takes is a mindset shift. I think we need to begin to start thinking about selling in a whole new way. I want you to start to think about selling as helping your clients to buy rather than selling to them. Another way to think about it, if that doesn't resonate with you, is it's really just problem solving, right? So our clients have a problem. They have a need that they need filled, whether it's music, whether it's a venue, whether it's planning their wedding, and you're there to help them fill that need. So we need to change our mindset a little bit and stop taking the pressure off of ourselves to sell and start focusing on helping them to buy, which is ultimately what we want to all do. So you can be the most talented makeup artist, event planner, floral designer, or in my case, stylist in the world, but that does not make you a good salesperson. But at the end of the day, as I talked about, in order for us to truly be successful, we have to master the art of selling. And it's not easy. It takes practice and it takes an understanding of our client. Because not all clients are created equal and they should not be treated as such. So many of you refer to selling as booking the client. But ultimately, in order to book them, you have to sell to them, right? So we're on the same page. It's the same thing. I own a bridal boutique in Connecticut. It's called The White Dress by the Shore. We just celebrated 16 years in business. Thanks. Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big accomplishment. I opened the boutique 16 years ago after leaving my corporate job in Manhattan. I was the vice president of merchandising for Ann Taylor. And I left to follow this dream that I'd had to open a bridal boutique. And I created this boutique. I started this business because I did not enjoy my bridal shopping experience. It was completely not what I expected to be or what I thought it should be. So I sought out to create the experience that I never had as a bride. I wanted the experience to be memorable. I wanted it to be special. And I wanted the service that they received to be personal and memorable. I have a history of clicker problems. You may have seen it on YouTube. Okay, so many of you might be thinking, all right, great. You sell products, you sell wedding dresses, I sell services. They're two different things. They're not. I'm here to tell you that selling products and selling services, it doesn't matter. My philosophy is that once you can master the art of selling, you can truly sell anything. Doesn't matter if it's $5, doesn't matter if it's $50,000. If you can sell anything. The thing is, I don't just sell products. I don't just sell wedding gowns. I also have a secondary company called Beth Chapman Styling and Consulting. On the styling arm of the business, I provide styling services for couples, mainly for brides, and myself and a team of stylists also provide a day of wedding dressing service, which some of you may be familiar with that, some of you may not. I'd love to tell you all about it over cocktails. And it's not lost on me that I stand between you guys and cocktails, so we'll get through this together. On the consulting side of things, I mentor other bridal store owners on running successful and profitable bridal stores, and I train them on selling. And I also am now training wedding pros on the art of selling as well. So I understand both sides of it. I understand selling products, I understand selling services, and honestly, there is no difference. So what are we gonna do today? We are gonna talk about the art of the tailored selling approach. So what we're gonna cover are the 5 keys of closing a sale, how to identify the personality type of your client, and how to create an individualized selling approach based on their personality. So let's start with the 5 keys of closing the sale. So these are several things, 5 things, that have to happen in your interaction with a client in order to ensure that you're going to close the sale, or as many of you like to refer to it as book the client. Number one is having a strong pre-sale. I'm going to go through these quickly and then we're going to go through them individually. Developing a relationship with the client, asking questions and listening to the answers, educating the client, and reassuring the client in their decision. So snap a quick pic of this, and then we are going to go through each one of them one by one because they're all very important. These are the 5 things that need to take place when you're interacting with the client to ensure that they're going to book you. Got it? Okay. So having a strong pre-sale. As salespeople, we are often focused on closing the sale. We're going to do a little bit of audience participation. Who can tell me when closing the sale takes place?
Before they talk to you.
Thank you. You win the prize. I don't know what that is, but you win the prize. So for those in the back who couldn't hear, it was before they talk to you, and thus the pre-sale. I think my slide might have helped you out a little bit, but good job. So when I train on selling, I teach that closing the sale actually begins before you even have a face-to-face interaction with the client. It all starts with the pre-sale. The way that you market yourself, and Kaylee talked about it, most of the people talked about it when they were up here, the way that you market yourself through your website, through social media, through everything that you put out there is all part of the pre-sale. So how many of you guys have a business plan? Okay, we need more hands. That's going to be our next, I'll talk to the folks at the knot. That's going to be our next talk. But in your business plan, it's super important that you identify who your target client is, because whatever you put out there needs to be with the target client in mind. You need to be speaking as if you are speaking to one person. It's the law of attraction, right? So whatever you're going to put out there, whatever it is that you want to get back. So it's going to ensure that you're not only attracting the right target client, but what it's going to do is it's going to start to psychologically prep your target client for working with you. They're going to look at what you're putting out there and decide whether or not you're the right fit for them. And then they're going to contact you if they think they are. So if they think you are. So what you're putting out there is very important in terms of starting that relationship, starting the pre-sale with the client, and ultimately booking them. So number 2 key to selling and closing the sale is developing that relationship. So the process of developing that relationship begins in that marketing phase, and then it continues to develop as you have an inquiry and then ultimately a consultation. So it's in the inquiry phase, it's in the pre-sale phase where it's a one-sided relationship, and then once they contact you in the inquiry phase, it becomes a two-sided relationship. It's so important that you develop an amazing rapport with your client. We just said it, I'm sure you know this quote, people buy from those that they like, know, and trust. If they don't like you, if you don't connect, they're not going to book you. But they are gonna start connecting with you. We just talked about it, millennials and Gen Zs are fully vetting you. They are fully researching you before you even have any kind of interaction with them. So it's very important that what you're putting out there starts to begin that relationship, and then you have to take a really good hard look at your inquiries in your company, who handles your inquiries, and how they're being handled, because that's going to be the next step in that relationship, and that can make or break the relationship. So you need to make sure that you understand how your target client wants to be communicated with, how they want you to communicate with them, and you need to do it in that way. Developing the relationship is so important to closing the sale. Number 3 is asking questions and listening to the answers. A huge part of selling is listening. There's a quote that I love: we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We need to listen twice as much as we speak. We also have to ask a lot of questions, and they have to be the right questions that will help you to uncover what it is that your client is truly looking for. So I think we all know that sometimes what your couples, what your bride and groom say and what they actually mean are 2 completely different things, right? And Pinterest certainly does not help that. So that's why asking those questions is really important, and then truly listening to what it is that they're saying to help to uncover what their needs truly are. So it's in this asking questions and listening to the answers that you are going to be able to start to identify the personality type of your client and determine the best way to sell to them. So besides building a relationship and listening to the client, another key is educating the client. It's so important that you show them that you're an expert in your field. So I think we just learned that with some of the statistics that we learn. Millennials and Gen Zs want to make sure that they're working with the best of the best. They want to make sure that they're working with people who know what they're doing. So you need to show them that you do. So in your initial conversations with the client, it's really important to educate them. So when you're asking those questions and listening to the answers, you should be using your responses to questions as a way to educate them. I'm not saying, I just recently did a podcast and I was talking about this, and one of the hosts said to me, so are you saying that you should just, when you're initially meeting with a client, like sit there and give them your entire resume of everything you've ever done? I was like, absolutely not, because that's the surest way to turn a client off. But as you're having that conversation with them and you're having that give and take, make sure that your responses are very specific and that you're using that time with the client to show them what you know and show them what you've done, whether it's through your words or through your work. Show them that you're an expert in your field, because it's going to build their trust. It's going to further the relationship, and it's going to make them want to book you. And number 5 is reassuring the client in their decision of booking with you. So in planning a wedding, most clients, and some more than others, have some level of doubt or uncertainty, right? So in most cases, they have never really done this before. So they don't know what they're doing, or they don't know if they're making the right decisions. They're about to spend a lot of money with you, right? So it's very important that you reassure them in their decision to book with you in all of your conversations. It's also super important that you uncover any hidden objections that they might have or any concerns. Because if they walk away from that consultation with you and have any questions or any lingering doubt, they're gonna ghost you. You guys all wonder why you get ghosted? It's because you haven't really asked the right questions and listened to the answers to understand what it is that they're concerned about. There's always that one thing, you guys know, especially wedding planners, there's always this one thing that couples get hung up on. And if you haven't addressed that for them, they're gonna keep looking. They're gonna keep talking to other wedding professionals until they find someone that they view as an expert and that's gonna reassure them that whatever that little thing that's driving them crazy is going to be okay. So it's so important that you address their concerns and you eliminate any uncertainty. If you do that, and if you allow the client to see you as an expert and you work on developing that relationship, you will close your sales. So, I have a really pretty picture coming up. There it is. So, we've discussed what it takes to get the sale. So now let's talk about tailoring your sales approach based on the personality of your client. So I'm going to take you through 5 common personality types. A lot of these are going to be all too familiar to you. You're going to be like, yep, I'm working with one of those right now. I'm working with one of those right now. And we're going to talk about how to sell to each one of them. So you should be able to identify, in most cases, early on in the process, sometimes in the inquiry phase, actually, what type of personality the client has, and you can figure out how to adjust your selling approach accordingly with some of these tips. The first personality type is the shopper. I experience this personality a lot in what I do on the fashion side of things. So what are the characteristics of the shopper? They tend to have an ego. He or she loves the attention that they are getting from talking about their wedding, meeting with wedding professionals, and in my case, trying on wedding dresses. They love the planning process and they don't want it to end. They also are a true millennial and they love researching. So they're on Instagram, they're on Pinterest, they're overloading themselves with information. They may not overtly come out and tell you that they've met with other makeup artists, photographers, DJs, other people in your field, but you're going to be able to tell from your conversations with them. You're going to be like, oh yeah, this is a shopper. You're going to be able to tell that they're getting around. So how do you sell to the shopper? The first thing you have to do is compliment them a lot. There you go, compliment them a lot. They love being the center of attention, so you have to reinforce this for them. Now, of course, it's our goal to make every single one of our clients feel super special, right? But it's even more important for you to do this with the shopper. The next thing you need to do is help them to focus. So they're going to need a lot of guidance to help them sort of narrow down their focus and figure out what it is that they're looking for, because they've been meeting with all of these other people in your field, right? They've been talking to all these different wedding professionals and been getting ideas all along the way. So they're not able to see the forest through the trees. They're now totally confused. They don't know what they like. They like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So it's going to be really important for you to help them to focus, for you to ask those questions and listen to the answers to truly uncover what their true vision is for their wedding. Kristen, I think, just talked about this. It's so important to show your competitive advantage. And if you haven't done the task yet of identifying with your team what your competitive advantage is, I want that to be a little bit of homework. I want you to go home and write down what sets you apart, at least 3 things that set you apart from your competitors. If you want to take it one step further, another good task is to actually write down all of your competitors and write down specifically the things that you do differently or better from them, so that you can reference them if a client tells you that they're going to see so-and-so. I'm not saying to badmouth your competition. You never badmouth your competition. But you can point out the observable differences between what it is that you do and what it is that they do, particularly if you've asked those questions and uncovered what they truly value, and you can align what they value with what your competitive advantage is. So it's so important to point those out to them. So it's important for you to show them that you're an expert in your field, and part of the way you can do that is by talking about your competitive advantage. The shopper also needs for you to identify next steps. we skipped one. This client, like we talked about, does not want the planning experience to end. So it's really important for them to know what the next steps are in the process and what future touch points that you're gonna have with them, because they're gonna wanna keep talking about their wedding with you. So this is also the point where you may decide, is this the right fit for me? When you have the shopper, you really have to think long and hard about this is something you want to do, because they're going to want to keep meeting with you and they're going to want to keep talking with you. So if you tell them what the next steps are, and both the planning process and on the day of the wedding, it will allow them to know when they're going to have touch points with you and hopefully put them at ease a little bit. Lastly, it's important with the shopper to make a lasting impression. In order to secure this client's business, it's more important than ever to wow them. Because if you don't, they're gonna keep shopping. One of two things is gonna happen. They are either going to keep shopping, and they're gonna get completely exacerbated and overwhelmed, and they're no longer gonna be excited about their wedding. Or they're gonna keep shopping, and they're going to find someone that knocks their socks off. Someone who does all of those 5 steps, and they're gonna book with them. So make sure that you are working to make this client feel special and have them book with you instead. Yay. All right. Personality 2, the expert. There's another name for this client, and it's the know-it-all. So this client has been planning their wedding basically since the day they were born, or they have a sister or best friend who was married 6 months ago, and now they know everything there is to know about weddings, right? Right? We have this. Sometimes you'll get a mom who's the expert, or I should say a lot of times you're gonna get a mom who's an expert who just planned her son's or daughter's wedding, and now she knows everything there is to know about weddings. We've all had this, right? So let's talk about how to connect with and sell to this type of client. The first thing you need to do with the expert is establish the ground rules. You have to rein this client in from go for your own survival. But here you go. If you want the business, you have to do this in a way that makes them feel like you actually appreciate their opinion, as difficult as that may be. So, but the first step though is to establish the guidelines. So you need to make sure that they are clear on your process, both in the planning phase and on the day of the wedding, because that's gonna allow both of you to know if this is gonna work. This may not work. If they don't like the way that you work, you say, hey, guess what? Here's the way I do things. And if they don't like it, then this isn't the right fit. So establishing the ground rules is really important. But then you have to give them an inch. They're the client after all, right? So this client knows everything there is to know about weddings. So in your conversations with them, you have to acknowledge that. It's a little painful, but you gotta do it. So you can say things like, wow, you've really done your research. Or you have amazing taste, right? Or if you really want to suck up a little bit, you can tell them how impressed you are by their knowledge. But then the next thing that you have to do, because what that does is it builds their trust, is what ultimately what's that doing is it's building their trust. But then what you have to do is show your expertise, right? So you're gonna acknowledge the knowledge that they think that they have about this planning process and planning a wedding. But then you're gonna show them who the expert really is in the nicest possible way. But you're going to wow them with your knowledge, you are gonna show them your competitive advantage, you are going to impress them. And ultimately, you're gonna win them over and build their trust. Lastly, important with the expert is to collaborate. Ultimately, they love the idea of planning the wedding, the expert does, right? And they wanna take control. So you need to give them a task or a job to do. So if you are a planner or designer, perhaps it's pulling a little bit of inspiration. Or if you're a photographer, perhaps you have them provide you with some imagery of poses that they love. Whatever it may be, it's giving them a task, and it's actually doing two things. One, it's making them feel like they have a little bit of control, because ultimately that's what they want. But two, it actually will benefit you because it will allow you for you to really better understand what their vision is for their wedding. So it's not for nothing. And it will again be key in building your trust. Our next personality type is the indecisive client. Who has one of these? Is anybody working with one of these right now? Yeah, I know. So this client loves so many things, they cannot see the forest through the trees. They cannot decide what they want. They are literally paralyzed with all of their options, and they're having trouble choosing a direction. Pinterest does not help us in regards to this, right? This client. What do you do? How do you deal with the indecisive client? Number one, you have to help them to focus. So that's when this asking the questions and listening to the answers is so important. Ask them to look at their Pinterest board, because you know they have one. That's part of the problem, right? Try to understand the venue, the color palette. Ask the questions and have them use their words to describe what they're saying as opposed to what they're showing you, because again, they might be two different things. But continually refer back to their vision in your conversations. This is going to allow them to feel like you really get them, even though you're like, I don't know what the hell this client wants, right? But use their words, repeat it back to them, and it will allow them to start to feel like you get them and then you understand them. But in doing that, it might allow you to really uncover what their true vision is. But next, you have to lay the ground rules. This client, the indecisive client, actually is craving structure. So they want someone that's going to help them to focus, and that's going to help them to make decisions, or ultimately is just going to make the decisions for them. That's what they're really looking for. So help them to understand your process. And with the indecisive client, it's important to speak to them even when you're in the inquiry phase or in the initial consultations phase, speak to them as if they've already booked you. So saying things like, when we work together, blah, 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 this is my process. So they understand how it's going, they can visualize what it's going to look like in working with you. Because ultimately, this client is seeking someone who's going to take the reins and is going to either help them make decisions or make decisions for them. And because of that, it's important to build their trust with the indecisive client. So showing your expertise, like we talked about, is going to go a really long way with the indecisive client. If they're going to turn that reins over to somebody, they want to make sure that it's with someone who is an expert in their field and is going to bring their vision to life. This is one of the most difficult personalities, I think. It's the detached client. Anybody have a detached client right now? Somebody who's just not excited at all about their wedding? Doesn't it break your heart a little bit? I know, it's really heartbreaking. But we can change it. We're gonna change it in this room right now. This is what you're gonna do. So they basically, it's not that they don't want to get married usually. It's just that they don't want to have a wedding, or they just don't want to go through this process. Most likely it's because there's somebody overbearing in their life, right? That's taking over everything and they're just completely shut down. Yeah, so hard. So the key to selling to this client is connecting with them. That's what's so important. So here's how you do that. Here's what you do. The first thing you have to do with the detached client is ask questions. So keep asking them questions until you touch on something that you can see a glimmer of hope or a glimmer of light with this client. And it might not even be wedding related. If you start talking about the wedding and you see the shutdown happening, completely change the subject. Talk about something else. Ask them about where they live. Ask them if they have a pet. Find out where they like to travel. That's going to help you ultimately in planning their wedding, but it also will help them to feel like the pressure is off talking about this wedding, and it will allow you to connect with them on a different level. And once you do that, you'll be able to go back to working on wedding details. Very important with the detached client to focus on him or her. So if they're consulting with their mom or their overbearing fiance or the expert sister who got married 6 months ago, right? And those people are taking over the conversation and they're talking about everything that they want. Make sure that you're continually referring back to this detached client and bring them into the conversation. Ask their opinion, validate their opinion, make them feel like they have an ally, because the reason most likely why they're shutting down is they feel like they can't get a word in edgewise and they might as well just throw their hands up and let it go. So be an ally and be someone that the detached client can trust. Because ultimately, most likely they have an opinion, it's just being overshadowed by the other people that are involved in the wedding planning process. Lastly, earn their trust. And that's how you're gonna do it, by what we just talked about, by showing them that you are invested in them. You wanna help them plan their wedding, because ultimately that's what we all want. This type of client is ultimately going to book with someone who they trust and they connect with. So it's important for that to be you. It may take more than one consultation with this client to book their business, because you may have to use that first meeting to just develop the rapport and develop the relationship, and then use a second conversation to actually talk about the wedding. Next is, or finally, this is our last personality, the cautious client. This is the client who's terribly afraid that something's gonna go wrong with their wedding. And you're like, please stop talking about all the things that could go wrong, because you're afraid that they're going to attract all the bad things to your wedding and you don't want to be involved in that. So this type of client is very easily identifiable, because they're going to ask you about 1 million questions. You usually can see this client coming a mile away in the inquiry phase, right? And so you may decide at that point, okay, am I going to do this or am I not? Am I suddenly booked on that day? So how do you handle the personality of the cautious client? The first thing you need to do is wow them with your knowledge. They are super uncomfortable, they are super cautious, so they want to know that they are hiring someone who's in complete control. So it's very important that you exude confidence to this client. It's going to allow them to you're going to earn their respect, and hopefully it's going to put them a little bit at ease. Again, they're going to ask you a lot of questions, so it's important to try to anticipate their questions. We've all been doing this for a while. We all know what the common questions are, right? So when you start to see that you have a cautious client, try to anticipate their questions and answer them before they've even asked them. Because again, it's going to show your expertise, it's going to show your understanding, and it's going to help them to realize that you're there for them. It's also important when you are answering these questions for the cautious client to make sure that they're clear. Say things like, have I answered your question? Do you have any further questions? Is that clear? Because it's going to allow them to realize that you're actually listening to them, and it's going to make them feel more comfortable and confident that you are the person that's going to make sure that their wedding runs smoothly. It's important with the cautious client to have conviction. It's important to provide your expertise and your opinion. I think oftentimes we're afraid to give our opinions, right? Sometimes the client turns to you and says, what do you think? And you're like, oh gosh, what do I say? Do I be honest? Do I not be honest? With this client, with the cautious client, it is important to actually give your opinion, because that's what they need. They need validation, and they need to pick a lane and drive, essentially. So the client wants to know that you are in control and that you are going to make sure that everything goes smoothly for whatever aspect of the wedding you are involved in for this client. If you are a planner, it is very important that you are also expressing confidence in every single vendor that you are bringing in to work on this wedding, so that they are reassured that everything is going to run smoothly. It's important with the cautious client to document everything. If you decide to move forward with them, it's important that most correspondence is written. That way you can refer back to things in writing. You can use the old, as per my previous email, copy and paste. But you know, they are an anxious person, and anxious people, even though you've answered the question, they don't hear it because they're so anxious, and they're going to ask it again. So it's really important that it's documented, so hopefully they can refer back to it and not have to continue to barrage you with questions, because they're going to have a lot of them. It's important with the cautious client for you to advise what's next in the process. They're very anxious, and for anyone who suffers from anxiety, it's important for them to know what's coming next, because it helps to put them at ease, it helps them to anticipate what's coming, and it will help to earn their trust. Follow-up is important in general, but with the cautious client, it is very important, because they most likely will not be able to book you on the spot. They're not going to be one of those clients that's just like, perfect, let's get this done. They're going to need to go home and perseverate and research you to the hilt and ask other people's opinions and ask questions. So it's important that you follow up to ensure that you get their business. And lastly, with the cautious client, it's important to show that you are invested, which I know you all are. So this client is only going to buy or book with someone that they fully trust. So show them that you are invested in making sure that their wedding is absolutely perfect, which I know you are, and they will be sure to book you. So I'm sure that you noticed in a lot of these personalities, regardless of personality type, there were a lot of recurring themes that happened regardless of personality types. We are going to go through them because these are strategies that should be present in every sale regardless of the personality type. The tricky thing, and you guys might already be thinking this, is that sometimes when you're in a client meeting, you're dealing with multiple personalities at one time. Not usually, sometimes in one person, but usually it's across different people, right? So you could have an expert mom, and you can have a detached bride, and you can have a, I don't know, what would be what personality for a groom? You know, yes, so you can have all different personalities, but I'm telling you that if you can really master the art of this, and if you can work to try to identify, even in the inquiry phase, what type of personality they are, you can manage to work with them and sell to them all at the same time. The key is that you need to try to identify who the decision maker is in the group. Who's writing the check, right? Definitely make sure that you are identifying that person's personality and selling to them and tailoring your selling approach to them, but you can't lose sight of the couple. You also have to identify the personality types of your couple and make sure that you're addressing them as well so that you make everyone feel at ease. So let's just discuss a few of these recurring themes that take place regardless of personality type, or you're going to see across personality type. We talked about it. Building a relationship is so important. You are not going to get the sale if the person does not like you. End of story. Ask questions and listen to the answers. You should be quick to listen and slow to answer. In selling, listening has to take precedence over talking. You need to listen first and then react. Educating the client is so important. It's imperative that you show them that you are an expert in your field, and you make sure that you've identified your competitive advantage and you're articulating that to your client. It's important to tell them what to expect. Notifying your client of the process helps to ease any uncertainty and any concerns, and it's key in closing the sale. If they have any unanswered questions or any objections that haven't been addressed, they're not going to book you. The thing that you need to recognize about selling is that the process doesn't really end. So we talked about closing the sale. You might think that closing the sale takes place when they book you. And it does, but the reality is you are selling to that client through the entire wedding planning process. You have to constantly be reassuring the client in their decision to book with you. Because ultimately, you are not just selling to him or to her. You are selling to every single one of their engaged friends. You are selling to every single person at that wedding. And if there's one thing we know about millennials and Gen Zs, right, they do everything by committee. They need an opinion on everything, right? And if they love something, they want to tell everyone else about it. That is why the Knot and the Wedding Wire reviews are so very important, because they devour those. They want to know what other people think and how other people are reacting. I have a 19-year-old daughter, and she doesn't buy any piece of clothing without reading a review, ever. So that's their personality. So it's so important that you keep that in mind, that you're not just selling to your couple. You're ultimately selling to every single person they know. So if you can master and identify how to sell to them and continue to do that, they're going to end up doing the selling for you, which is amazing. And that should be our ultimate goals. So I hope when you return home, you think of me next time you're in a consultation. You think of me up here in my little leopard dress, and you think about the personality type and the best way to handle it, because no two clients are equal, and they should not ever be treated as such. So remember, important thing to remember, is we are here to help our clients buy. We're here to solve a problem for them. We are not selling to them. So if you can shift your mindset to be that way, if you can keep our 5 keys of selling that we just went through in mind, and if you can tailor your selling approach based on the personality of the client, you are gonna close every single sale. And I can't wait to hear how that goes for you. So these are all the ways to keep in touch. I have a little gift for you guys on my Instagram if you go to my Instagram. So would love to hear from you guys. Keep in touch, and let's go have a cocktail. Thank you.